As we head into the New Hampshire primary tonight, more Democratic officials are worried about a possible brokered convention.
In his latest piece for The Hill, national political reporter Jonathan Easley spoke with party experts in New Hampshire who cite the chaos in Iowa and Michael Bloomberg's entry into the race as cause for concern. Jonathan joins us now via Skype to discuss what he is seeing on the ground. Great to have you, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, all right, so we don't want to read too much into these things, but Michael Bloomberg did just win Dixville Notch. So just to underscore the point that you're making about these fears of a brokered convention, I'm sure data points like that don't help.
No, they don't help. And look, we can preface this by saying there's a long way to go. It's still possible that one candidate could break away from the pack, start steamrolling the entire field, and win a majority of the delegates. But obviously, the muddled results coming out of Iowa, both the split results between Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg, along with the delay in reporting the results, didn't add any clarity to this race whatsoever. Democrats are obviously hopeful that we'll get some clarity tonight in New Hampshire. It looks like Bernie Sanders might be headed for a small win, potentially over Pete Buttigieg, maybe a big win. We don't know yet. But there's just so much uncertainty in this field. Not a lot of candidates have a lot of incentive to get out of this race after New Hampshire. Joe Biden is banking his entire campaign on South Carolina, essentially. But yeah, the big wild card in all of this is Mike Bloomberg, who's waiting for the entire field on the other side of Super Tuesday. He spent $350 million in television ads, and it's working. He's gone up to double digits in national polls right now. Like you said, the Dixville Notch, I mean, Bernie didn't win that because we had a few people write in Mike Bloomberg's name. There's some surprising support out there, I think, for Mike Bloomberg. Now, maybe that will change once he gets on the debate stage with these folks, but I mean, it's just hard to know what to expect in a field that has two billionaires that are dipping into their pockets for this airwaves war, just blanketing the airwaves, right, essentially. Bernie Sanders looks like he's picking up steam. A lot of candidates in the centrist lane, still a lot to figure out, but it's starting to look more plausible to some Democrats that no one will get a majority of the delegates.
So, Jonathan, who have you been so you've spoken with these Democratic officials. What do they say about a broker convention? Are they generally committing to the idea that if you come into the convention with the most delegates, that you're going to be the eventual nominee? Or are there going to be some backroom deals? Or are they going to swing it? Which way are they thinking right now?
I mean, it's early for them to speculate. I mean, I think they would prefer to avoid a brokered convention altogether, obviously. They feel like it could tear the party apart. Now, if someone like Bernie Sanders comes in with, 45% of the delegates, something very close like that, I think it's going to be very hard for another candidate to make the case that they deserve to be the party nominee. But also, Bernie Sanders does not want to go into a brokered convention at all. Obviously, he and his supporters do not trust the process. They don't trust the national party, and they really don't have a lot of support within the national party, right? Their support is more working class people, young people across the country who are not necessarily involved in the machinery of the Democratic Party. Right. So he wants to avoid that at all costs. I mean, just the nature of a brokered convention, I think, is backroom deals. But I think if someone was close enough, it would probably swing in their direction. But that just sort of adds to the uncertainty of this whole thing.
Right.
Yeah, there is certainly no love lost between the Sanders movement and the DNC. And I mean, frankly, for good reason, especially after the mess that occurred in Iowa. But it seems to me, Jonathan, as there is this sort of muddle in the centrist lane of people trying to be the anti-Bernie candidate. You've got Pete, who had a head of steam coming out of Iowa. You've now got Amy Klobuchar, who looks like she may finish in an unexpected, maybe even third place. She could grab that comeback kid mantle. And what it occurs to me is that as long as there are so many other candidates dividing up the vote, that's an ideal situation for Bernie and to a lesser extent for Mike Bloomberg.
100%. And it's sort of ironic. I mean, in 2016, a lot of people said Bernie benefited by virtue of being the only alternative to Clinton. Well, this time around, it looks like he's benefiting from this massive field of centrists or moderates competing to be the centrist standard bearer. So, yeah, in the near future, as long as Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar are competing for the sort of those moderate votes, I think it does help Bernie Sanders. He's obviously galvanized the left. He's He's clearly overtaken Warren as sort of the favorite progressive standard bearer. And so I think you're going to start seeing some pressure, maybe even as soon as after New Hampshire, for some of these candidates to drop out. There is a clear contingent within the Democratic Party that is fearful of a Sanders candidacy and wants one of these centrists to emerge. And if they continue to split the vote, I think we'll start to hear a lot more from them about whether some of these centrists should start dropping out.
Yeah. Well, so Jonathan, who has the energy there on the ground? You're on the ground in New Hampshire right now. What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly, Bernie Sanders has the grassroots support. I mean, we saw Andy's got the celebrity star wattage, the rock concert last night with the Strokes out in Durham, 7,000 people. I went out to he'll do really well in the rural parts of this state. I went out to Rochester. There was a quaint old opera house that he packed, hundreds. I think it was like 1,000 capacity, about that many people. Hundreds got turned away. Bernie Sanders is the hot ticket. Pete Buttigieg as well. I mean, he was getting massive crowds. He set the record for the largest crowd in New Hampshire on Saturday morning before Bernie Sanders eclipsed his record late in the afternoon. Those two clearly headed for a heavyweight showdown tonight. We'll see who can do better with that. Amy Klobuchar, like we mentioned, she's getting a lot of buzz. We're going to have to wait and see if this is just media-generated buzz from her strong debate performance, or whether she can turn that into success at the ballot box. Those three are the clear buzzworthy candidates. Not a lot of energy right now around Joe Biden. Not a lot of energy right now around Elizabeth Warren. I think they could be headed for a lower finish that could really damage their campaigns.
Yeah, we both tend to agree with you there.
And how do the dynamics play out in terms of the fact that independents and even Republicans can vote in this primary? How important will that be to the ultimate result?
Yeah, I mean, I love this angle. It's a fascinating state. So 42% of voters in New Hampshire are registered as undeclared, not affiliated with either party. They're independents, 29% Republican, 29% Democrat. So these undeclared voters can show up on election day, pick a Democratic ballot most likely because there's not a contested Republican primary this year, and vote for whoever they like. The big question is, are these independents sort of more aligned with Bernie Sanders and his anti-establishment message, or are they sort of right-leaning, maybe former Republicans, former Trump supporters that feel disillusioned, not into his style or whatever, and want to participate in the Democratic primary this time? All the candidates are banking on picking up these undeclared voters. Bernie Sanders thinks his outsider message will align with the independent vote. Pete Buttigieg is pitching himself as the candidate who can attract support from future former Republicans. That's the term that he uses. So yeah, a lot riding on which way those independent voters break, and we have no idea how many will turn out, and we have no idea who they'll support.
Well, and maybe
fascinating to watch.
They're going to write in Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah,
you never know.
Maybe they will.
Thank you so much.
All right, see you, man.
All right, thanks, guys.
Next on Rising, how's the Bernie Sanders camp preparing for New Hampshire and beyond? Sanders senior advisor Chuck Rocha joins us next.